Well, greetings, everyone. I'm Lee Rosh, and I'm with the organization Leader Ethics, and we're pleased to be partnering in the delivery of this program with the Viterbo University Reinhardt School of Institute for Ethics and Leadership. And we're delighted to be bringing this program offered by American Promise, and it's just such a high priority issue today. The recent state Supreme Court election just put this issue on everybody's radar. And because of that, what may have seemed like a long shot a year or two ago is now looking like, hey, there's enough concern that's coming forward. This is the time to bring forward some action. So we're delighted to have this program to offer today. I want to first off thank our program sponsors because they help to make these programs available. Dave and Barb Scogan with Festival Foods, Ann Bryce and Bill Haviland, Joe and Pat Heim, Tom Houlihan, Suzanne Young, and Leader Ethics. And just a reminder, we are going to take questions, but we're asking you to write them up on a card, and later on the program we'll collect those, so we'll have a chance to go through those and answer your questions in that manner. And now, I'd like to turn the program over to our moderator, Sam Shinta.
Thank you so much, Lee. Welcome, everybody. I'm Sam Shinta, the program host for Rebuilding American Civics, which we're doing this in conjunction with the Leader Ethics group today. So welcome all of you. I know you weren't counting. Those of you who are Rebuilding American Civics students here weren't maybe counting on this, but we had this wonderful opportunity, and whenever we have these opportunities to partner with Leader Ethics, we're always happy to do so. Again, I'd like to thank the Viterbo Reinhardt Institute for Ethics in Leadership for all of their support in these programs as we move forward. Today we're going to be talking about a pretty important topic, campaign finance reform. American Promise, the group that we are so happy to have some folks affiliated with here today, has a singular goal: to pass the For Our Freedom Amendment. I'm going to let them talk about what this actually is. So far, 23 states, red states and blue states alike, have called on Congress for passage of this amendment. Now, I talk a lot to community groups. I teach at both Viterbo and at UW-La Crosse, talking with hundreds of students a semester. And by far, the number one topic that I hear about from audiences is campaign finance issues. Again and again and again, it always comes up without a doubt. And so we're so excited to be talking about this today and to give you some great information and working with some people who are actually doing something about this, which is wonderful in today's day and age. So Jeff Clements, there on my far right there, is the co-founder and CEO of American Promise. Over his 3-decade legal career, Jeff has held positions in both public service and private practice, and is a frequent speaker on the issue of campaign finance reform. Jeff, what got you initially interested in this topic?
Well, Sam, thank you first. Thank you for having me here. Hello, everybody. I'm glad to be here in La Crosse. I flew in from Chicago just now by way of Boston, but I was telling Sam just how beautiful it is flying in, and it's just lovely country. And I unfortunately have to go back to Chicago for a meeting tonight, but I want to stay longer next time. So thank you for having me here. It's really lovely. One of the great things about my work as CEO of American Promise is I get to see this beautiful country and, frankly, our beautiful people everywhere in the country. So it's a real treat to be here. So what got me involved in this? As Sam mentioned, I practiced law for a long time. Saying 30 years makes me feel old, but I guess it's true. I did. And I was a partner in a big Boston law firm. I was assistant attorney general in the attorney general's office in Massachusetts. And I had seen over the course of that legal work the Constitution getting changed without the involvement of the American people. It was basically an inside job by lawyers, I'm sorry, by the lawyers and the judges to rewrite the First Amendment to say, hey, money is free speech, so we the people are not allowed to have anti-corruption laws that protect our rights as citizens, our rights to equal voting and to have our voice count, and to have the people of Wisconsin maybe decide who should be on your Supreme Court, not billionaires from outside Wisconsin who don't care about the state. So all of those laws that we had for over a century were starting to go down. And then, so as I was going back to private practice after a stint in public service with the Attorney General's office, I actually had not been involved in campaign finance, but I was starting to talk a lot more about, look, something is happening to our Constitution. It's getting taken away from what it meant, what the founders thought, what the American people thought for a long time, and it's being changed to make those who have great power have more power, and those who don't, not. And so somebody called me up and said, that stuff you've been ranting about, you really should pay attention to what's going on in the Supreme Court, because the McCain-Feingold, named after your Senator Feingold and John McCain of Arizona, that law, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act, was up before the Supreme Court, and all these big money people and groups were saying it's unconstitutional because spending money to gain power in our political system is free speech, was the theory. So I did a brief in the Citizens United case, is the short answer. Mm-hmm. I did a brief in the Supreme Court. I then went out to Montana, where they were having the same concerns and conversations. Steve Bullock was the Attorney General. I knew him from the days of working in the AG's office. He was determined to defend the right of the states, the right of Montana, the right of Wisconsin, to have laws you've had for a long time for anti-corruption laws. And he said, I don't know what they're doing in Washington with Citizens United, but here in Montana, we know what free speech is, and it isn't about unlimited money in our political system. Mm-hmm. So we won. Again, the super PACs, what we now know as super PACs, came in. They said, we're going after your law. We can spend unlimited money, and you can't stop us because the Supreme Court says it's a free speech right. And we won in the Montana Supreme Court. Overwhelmingly, the Supreme Court agreed, yeah, Montana and Americans have a right to limit the power of money from corrupting our political system. Went up to the US Supreme Court, not even a hearing. No hearing at all. The Supreme Court just summarily reversed one paragraph and said, Montana, you're wrong. Citizens United decided this. States, Americans, you have no right to limit the spending of money in the political system. But then I saw something very different that I'd never seen as a lawyer. They don't teach you this in law school. The American people know what's happening. This is 2012 now. Montana, with no real campaign, no money, within weeks, 40,000 Montanans had signed a petition to put on the ballot. I don't know if you have ballot initiatives here in Wisconsin. Yeah, Montana, they have ballot initiatives, 40,000 signatures, put it on the ballot. It was a law that they wanted passed that said, the Supreme Court, you're wrong. We're going to correct your decision. We're going to amend the Constitution. It'll be the 28th Amendment to the US Constitution. It'll correct and overrule the Citizens United case and return the power to the people to enact effective anti-corruption laws. And I watched as that passed 75% to 25% in November 2012. And it was clear, like, Americans get it, they want to fix it, they're united. I think Barack Obama lost to Mitt Romney that year in Montana, 75-20, or by 15 points. This one, 75-25. So it was clear voters, it didn't matter if they were Republican, Democrat, Independent, and that's when I realized this thing, we could actually do this. If we bring it to the people, if we get the lawyers out of the way, bring it to the people, we can amend the Constitution. It fits on a napkin. You saw it coming in. It's not complicated, but it's not easy. And so I'm sure we'll talk about how we can get it done. But it's a privilege to be here. That's how I got involved. I'm a volunteer, too, by the way. We have a great staff, Allen Law Police, a board. I see our board member, Alex Renard from Green Bay in the back, and amazing volunteers like Judy. And I guess I'm a super volunteer like you, right? But we do have a staff and a budget to get this done. But our job is to serve you and all Americans in getting this done. We're Republicans, Democrats, Independents. We don't care how you vote. We want to do this together. So,
excellent. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. Well, with Jeff today is Judy Nagel, and Judy is from the other side of the state, the other coast of Wisconsin, yes. From Green Bay, and she is formerly a financial advisor at Wells Fargo, has served on many local and statewide boards. I actually served with Judy for the 9 years that I was on overlapping with the Wisconsin Historical Society Board of Curators, but just a great person. And Judy is involved in this. She serves on the Wisconsin Statewide Committee for American Promise, focusing on this campaign finance reform. Judy, what got you involved in this topic?
Well, I got involved just as a regular citizen because over the various elections, I've listened to all these campaigns, the ads, and the ads don't tell you anything about the policy positions of the candidates. All they do is give you character assassination. So you feel like when you're going to the poll to vote, do I vote for schmuck A or do I vote for schmuck B? And which is the lesser of two schmucks? So it really creates a lot of voter apathy because if you have a choice of voting between two undesirables, why show up to vote? So I was really feeling very powerless, and I had one of our long-serving Rotarians give me a call one day and say, you should talk to this woman, Jane Benson. So I did, and Jane introduced me to American Promise, and that they were working on campaign finance reform. I thought, well, now, this is something, I could feel like I was doing something and I wouldn't be helpless. So before I get involved in anything, I kind of check out its background. And what I discovered is that the advisory board of American Promise was made up of retired Republican and Democratic congressional people. It also had on board the premier presidential historian, as well as business owners. And Jeff Clements' credentials were pretty impressive, too. So I thought, this is an organization that I can get involved with, and I reached out to one of my fellow Rotarians. We'd both served as president of our Rotary Club, and we decided that we would do some presentations. And we started out with our own Rotary Club first, and then we branched out and talked to some other Rotary clubs, and we held some town hall meetings to inform people about this whole issue. The person that I brought on board with me also was involved, was supportive of a different political party than I. So we approached this on a bipartisan level. It's kind of like leadership by example. And he had done a number of presentations. He had been associated with various other Rotary clubs. And when we did this presentation, he said this is the best response he'd ever gotten from an audience. They were coming up to us and going, what can we do to help? And so we knew we had an issue that had broad support. So I'm going to share with you the Rotary presentation that we've used. First of all, Rotary is really careful about being a non-political organization, but we have a very long history of civic engagement. And most people don't know this, but we were one of the founders of the United Nations. Prior to the end of World War II, it was calculated there was somewhere between 70 to 85 million people that perished in World War II. About 20 to 25 million were soldiers, the rest were civilians. So it was thought that there had to be a better means of dealing with conflict than through warfare. So that's where that all got started. So what I'd like to do is talk to you today about this idea that the American Promise has in the context of positive peace. And we're seeing now a disturbing trend towards pay-to-play politics, and that's undermining the peace and the civic engagement in the United States. And there are some solutions that you might want to support. I'll start by connecting a few dots on patterns you may have already sensed, but not had time to look at in depth. And the first part is going to focus on the problem, and then we'll review some very positive signs, and then 3 ways that you can help us take action. So I'd like to talk about it through the lens of positive peace. And positive peace is the optimum environment for human potential to flourish. And Rotary has a long history of working on peace and conflict resolution and prevention. And as you may or may not know, Rotary formed a partnership in 2014 with the Institute for Economics and Peace, which studies positive peace. And their research shows 8 pillars that contribute to positive peace. These 8 pillars predict future physical violence, greater societal well-being, and higher economic growth. Thanks to the efforts of groups like Rotary, positive peace has been growing around the world. In 2017, 6 champions were honored at the United Nations Day of Peace, including work done on the peace treaty in Colombia. And in 2018, Rotarians celebrated projects in Uganda and Mexico. But positive peace has actually declined in North America. Though we started relatively high, our overall positive peace score has deteriorated by 4.5% since 2005. That now ranks the US as number 18 and Canada number 11, and both have had deteriorations. This was driven by 3 factors: equality in distribution of resources, acceptance of others' rights, civility, and this one might surprise you, perceived low levels of corruption. These 3 factors declined by 18% during the period 2005 to 2017. Former President Jimmy Carter actually spoke about this in the Rotarian. In talking about peace, he specifically talked about challenges in the United States. The Carter Center has been unable to certify US elections because our election system is not uniform, and we do not meet their standard for equal access. That's where every candidate who is qualified would have equal chance to present their proposals to the public with uniform access to the public news media and to people's minds. And there is a minimal impact of financial contributions. This led him to say, nowadays, the wealthy people get more wealthy and the powerful people get more powerful, and the average person doesn't have an equal influence on the American government anymore. The United States has changed from a democracy to something of an oligarchy in the last few decades. The candidates who seek to be president have to raise a minimum nowadays of $200 million before they can hope to receive the Democratic or Republican nomination. And then a lot more later when they run against the opposite party's candidate. The wealthy people get more wealthy, and the powerful people get more powerful, and the average person doesn't have an equal influence on the American government anymore. So, what do we do as Rotarians? And this is something we recite every week at our Rotary meetings. Is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? And will it be beneficial to all concerned? So the first question, is it the truth? Clearly, if voters do not know the truth of who is influencing them, we cannot have the free and open exchange of ideas on which democracy depends. But with the rule changes, certain groups no longer have to disclose their donors. This created a way for funders to influence campaigns without the voters knowing who they are dealing with and what their interests are, and this is called dark money. And as you can see, the amounts have increased dramatically, and it's not traceable. Potentially, it can come from foreign sources, say when a corporate contributor is foreign-owned. So you can have a situation in a state or federal race where there is an attack ad at the 11th hour, which states something that's totally untrue, but the candidate doesn't know who's behind it. How do they respond? How do they have an open and honest debate? This actually happened in Montana. They had rules in their state constitution that were overridden by Citizens United. This led to a flood of money, much of it out of state, and upset a state legislative race. And this is actually shown in the movie Dark Money. In response, Senator Lou Jones said, "There will never be truth in politics until voters can follow the money." So we can say the rules that have been adopted make it harder to know the truth. Then we ask, is it fair? Do these new rules foster a government accountable to the people it serves? What would you like to see if that legislation enacted reflects a degree of support from citizens? If that were the case, you would see a line going up at a 45-degree angle. But what researchers have found is that it's a flat line. That is, there is zero correlation between the preferences of the average citizen and government policy. But there has been a strong positive correlation with the preferences of economic elites and special interests. And that's not surprising when you consider that more than 76% of the political spending comes from just 1% of the population. Those contributions drive who gets a seat at the table, who gets access, whose perspective is included in the discussion. These statistics are troubling enough, but it turns tragic when we see the consequences for human lives. For example, in the build-up to the opioid crisis, manufacturers were paying $10,000 to $25,000 for the opportunity to attend discussions where they could influence the FDA on the criteria for approving painkillers, which advisors say contributed to the FDA approving claims that OxyContin was less addictive than other narcotics without clinical trials, a major factor in the opioid crisis that's taken over 400,000 lives. And this is just one example. We know of others, such as the Boeing 737 MAX, or unequal access for exemptions from tariffs. And when people hear these, they know it's not fair to all concerned. And one last disturbing trend, and then we'll shift to the more optimistic data. So we ask, will continuing down this path build goodwill and better friendships? We all know the answer to that. Far from building goodwill, these trends are tearing our country apart. As we can see here, Americans have had a growing sense that our government is run for the benefit of a few big interests. As distrust grows, each side points to the other as a reason they can't get anything done. In addition, those who benefit in this system have an incentive to blame others rather than engaging difficult issues and decisions. This is a major contributor to polarization, outrage, civic disengagement, apathy, and a loss of civility. And as Rotarians, we see this damage firsthand in our families, our work, and with our neighbors. In 1964, 64% believed government was run for the benefit of all, and 29% said for the benefit of a few big interests looking out for themselves. In 2016, 79% believed government was for a few big interests, and 19% believed for the benefit of all. Trust in institutions in the US is in the bottom quartile for the world. And every year since 2015, Americans' single greatest fear has not been terrorism, the loss of a loved one, or a job, but the corruption of government officials. But as we turn to the last question, we need to take a deeper look. When we ask, is this beneficial for all concerned, we see it isn't. In fact, it's an arms race where no one really wins. And here's the uplifting thing. Those who can speak freely and want to serve the common good are raising their concerns on this issue. And they call out how it is at the root of our frustrations. Business leaders are also frustrated, though often privately. Because when companies contribute or spend, it opens them up to a sort of legalized extortion by government officials when they must spend to avoid negative legislation. Besides, in the long term, this is detrimental to the economy and business because it pushes companies to compete through government favors rather than innovating or investing for the long term or delivering for customers in the marketplace. Now, there is a silver lining. Americans actually agree. There are many polls that show that Americans share a concern over the rise of pay-to-play and distortions in representation. In fact, Americans are working on civic reform in droves, anti-gerrymandering, to disclosure laws, to civility training and electing new candidates. Probably the most surprising, and what we want to focus on today, is that they actually agree on the need to set limits on political spending. For example, when presented with an argument for an amendment to address money in politics, here were the responses grouped by political leaning. The fact is, Americans are divided on many things, but they are united on the need to restore representative democracy and self-government. What this suggests to me is that we need to shift to working on the root causes together. And frankly, that's a whole lot more fun. So you may ask, why focus on an amendment? There are many reasons, but a few are laid out here. But I will say one of the most interesting to me is the last one. That is, the process itself requires us to engage with each other as citizens and renew that core American promise. It gives us something to be for instead of against. It pushes us to work on civility and educate ourselves about the foundations of our civic processes. And it feels imperative to respond and join the energy of so many young people to take actions to step up to address the root issue, undermining trust in our country. And I hope you will join me in this effort. And if you're so inclined, we do have citizen pledges over there on the table. And now I'm going to hand it back to you, Jeff, or if you're going to.
Yeah, I've got some questions, and again, I'll remind you all, if you have questions, please write them down on the cards there. We will be collecting those in a little bit, but we'll have a little conversation here. I'm actually really glad you pulled up the picture of Alan Simpson, who passed away recently. Simpson had a wonderful line about politics. He said, yeah, just remember, politics comes from the ancient Greek, poly meaning many, and ticks meaning blood-sucking creatures. So, kind of germane to the topic. So you talk about this constitutional amendment, and I've got a couple questions that are related here to this whole idea. First of all, given that there is so much public support, why have we not done anything in 13 years? It's been since 2012. you would think maybe Congress would respond if this was this much push for this. Why not just legislation? Why a constitutional amendment?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. And Judy, thank you for sharing that presentation. Would you mind just raise your hand if you think money in our political system is a serious threat to our American democracy? Okay. That's what I get in every room in America. And I don't know your politics, and it doesn't matter because whether it's a blue area, red area, anything in between, that's what happens. And so that really goes to the question, if that's true, why haven't we fixed it yet, right? If we all agree, and here's the thing, we are not allowed to, right? We're used to thinking like policy happens when the voters insist and it gets agreed and our legislators finally move. That doesn't happen with constitutional rules. When the Supreme Court says something that we want is unconstitutional, our elected officials aren't allowed to do it. We're not allowed to do it. That's what's happened in the country these past 15 years. The Supreme Court, not just in one case, and it's actually even before, it goes back about 25, 30 years, the Supreme Court has just kept forcing us to accept a theory that most Americans don't agree with, which is that this spending is a constitutional right of free speech. And they made it up. It's not in the First Amendment, right? That says Congress shall pass no law infringing on the freedom of speech. That's or the press. That's what the First Amendment says. For 200 years, it didn't mean that. The Supreme Court made up this theory, pushed by a bunch of lawyers. It doesn't work now. We've had it for 15 years. We can look around. Does anyone feel like they have more free speech than they used to, right? It doesn't work. So here's the thing, though. The Supreme Court, when it makes a mistake, sometimes changes their mind. Usually it takes 50, 60 years, you know? And they realize, okay, we were wrong, and they change. They overrule, as the lawyers say, those previous decisions. This Supreme Court is not going to do that, not soon enough to save this country. So that means there's only one thing we can do if we want to fix this. It doesn't, all the ideas, you may have great ideas, we'll have limits, we'll have disclosure, we'll have public financing, we'll say, if you don't live here, you can't vote here. We won't agree on all of those different ideas, but this is not a problem of we don't have enough good ideas. It's a problem of power. We don't have the power as Americans to do what we know we need to do to save our rights in our country. So that means we have to get the power back because it's been taken from us. And the only way to do that, and that's the beauty of it, as Judy said, it turns out we actually have to work together. We have to stay at it because we need a constitutional amendment. And this is not a new theory. We didn't make it up. This will be the 9th time Americans corrected Supreme Court decisions. The Supreme Court said women have no right to vote. The Supreme Court said 18, 19, 20-year-olds can be pulled out of their towns, drafted, and sent overseas to war without a right to vote. The Supreme Court said we can have a poll tax. On and on and on. The Supreme Court makes decisions that sometimes are wrong. And Justice Scalia said it. Hey, we're wrong sometimes. If you don't like it, amend the Constitution. That's what we've done 8 times. So this will be number 9. So this is not new. This is what we do as a country when the chips are down. And boy, the chips are down, right? So we have to do it. Why hasn't it been done yet? Well, it's hard. You know? It's not a complicated concept, and the amendment simply, it doesn't say what all the answers will be. It gives us the power back to make those answers. You'll be able to do that here in Wisconsin. Congress will be able to do that for the federal elections. But without the amendment, we can't do it. So here's why it's hard, though. The founders, and I think it's very wise that they did this, amendments shouldn't be easy, or we'd be changing the Constitution all the time whenever we had an idea, and that might be wrong, right? So it takes 2/3 of Congress to propose the amendment. It then has to go through a process of ratification in 38 states. And here's the thing, that Congress is usually not the one who comes up with the idea, right? Because usually the amendment needs to happen because the political system isn't working, right? So that's why we have to do it like this. You right now are amending the Constitution because you're here. That's how the amendments happen. So that takes some time. So we started a strategy to support Americans in the states at the state level where you could meet, you could sign the citizen pledge, you could call your legislator, you could have civic meetings like this, you could do Rotary presentations, get your local chamber on board, and get Wisconsin legislators to say, like Montana did, Supreme Court, you're wrong, we want this constitutional amendment, and that's how the congressional delegation starts to feel the pressure. And we prove what we mean and what we know is true, that this is not a partisan issue. Republicans and Democrats in Congress who vote for this, both will be rewarded, but we have to show them, we have to do it. So that's why it has been some years, but it's not that nothing is happening. Here's the amazing thing. 23 states have now done this. 23 states, the people have insisted, we are going to amend the Constitution. The most recent was in Utah. Just in March, a few weeks ago.
And 180 Wisconsin municipalities.
And 180 Wisconsin municipalities. I hope La Crosse, right?
Has pushed the...
We'll have to, yeah, so you can do this at the local level and then the state level, so 23 states. But let me tell you about Utah, because a lot of Democrats in Congress got on board early, so some of the Republicans thought, Barack Obama's for this, Nancy Pelosi, I can't be for this. I don't know what it is, but I can't be for it. So we really work hard in Republican states to show, yes, you can do this for your own reasons. They can be different reasons than the Democrats have, but you still get the 2/3 vote. So Utah is pretty important. It's almost all Republican. We won in the House 63-9. We won in the Senate 20-4. That tells the Utah delegation, hey, this is a good thing to support. And so Wisconsin could be the 24th state, and I hope it will be. We can talk more about how to do that, but that's why it hasn't been fixed yet. But we know how to fix it. It's going to take some time, but most of all, it's going to take us doing what Judy's doing, what Lee and Sam, whatever, bringing us together to talk and then move this forward and get the Wisconsin vote.
And taking your power back.
And taking your power back.
You don't have to feel helpless.
Yeah.
Take your power back.
So, Citizens United was just the kind of the latest or the ultimate iteration on the whole idea of free speech and elections and money as a symbolic method of free speech. This has gone back since the 70s. How does this amendment balance the interests of free speech? Because I'm sure there are those that are concerned about closing off, and you're not looking to close off all campaign finance from the amendment. So how are you balancing the free speech concerns with what might need to be done?
Yeah. Mind if I take that one?
You go right ahead.
You have to have the expert material, the napkin. So you pull out your napkin. So section 1 is where the balance happens. So let's just think about the First Amendment. We all know what free speech is, right? None of us want to silence, maybe you do, but you know you shouldn't. Silence each other or say, you can't say that. And so, we have town meeting in New England. I don't know if you do that here, but everyone gets, their 2 minutes, and everyone has a right to speak. And just because you have more money, you don't get 20 minutes, when everyone else has 2 minutes, right? So we get that the First Amendment is a balance, that we all have free speech, therefore we have to have rules that let all of us speak. If you have to get a permit to go down to do a parade because you don't want 25 groups all fighting for the same parade source. So regulation is not hostile to free speech. It has to be good regulation, and there's bad regulation, but the idea that somehow free speech means anything goes gets us exactly what we have, which is if you have $10 billion, you've got a lot of free speech, and the rest of us don't. So that's what the Supreme Court did wrong when they created this theory, is they forgot the balance. And so if I went in to argue to the Supreme Court, well, the McCain-Feingold law or Wisconsin anti-corruption laws are okay because they're balancing free speech rights against the equal rights of Americans. Literally, the Supreme Court would say, no, that's not good enough. Equal rights don't matter. The Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court said when Arizona had put in their law that they're trying to level the playing field, this Chief Justice said, evidence that it's unconstitutional. They're trying to level the playing field. right? And I can see some head scratching, right? It's weird, but that's what they said. So equality doesn't matter. Federalism, the right of Wisconsin to decide your own elections and not have every school committee race or DA's race or local be a national battle about national issues with national donors who are neglecting and ignoring the issues that you guys want to talk about. That's a First Amendment concern. It's not, so all of those are usually balanced. The Supreme Court said, no, we don't care about that. They struck down Montana's laws, they struck down Alaska's laws that tried to protect their rights. So how do we put it back? That's how the amendment works. It doesn't say what the law that will actually, it doesn't establish limits. It's the reason it's simple. It simply gets the balance back. So section 1, we the people have compelling sovereign interests in the freedom of speech, yes, representative self-government, federalism, the integrity of the electoral process, and the political equality of natural persons, okay? So that just establishes, those are the things that go into the balance. And I would think none of us would disagree with any of them, right? But the Supreme Court disagrees with all of them. And so then so we need to put that back in the Constitution where we think it belongs. Section 2 says nothing in the Constitution shall be construed to forbid Congress and the states within their respective jurisdictions, so the states decide for the states, from reasonably regulating or limiting contributions and spending in campaigns, elections, or ballot initiatives. Okay, boom, that's it. You got the power back. Nothing in the Constitution stops it. And then section 3, in doing that, we the people, Congress, the states, when we pass those laws, we can make distinctions between human beings and artificial entities. Now, what does that mean? It means, unions and corporations are not the same as people. They're tools that we use in the economy, but they're not like us, right? So if we made different rules for individuals versus unions and corporations, which we always have in this country since the whole 20th century, that's not unconstitutional. Today, the Supreme Court says it is unconstitutional. That's the old corporations are not people argument. Supreme Court says it's unconstitutional. You have to treat them all the same. This says, no, you don't. They're different things. Humans have rights, right? Our tools don't. And then it says artificial entities because we didn't invent this language. We took it around the country in meetings like this. People gave us feedback. It's not carved in stone. If you got a good idea, now's the time. But somebody said, and this was about 5 years ago, you should really be thinking about artificial intelligence, AI. That's going to be a real problem. And now we see, here it is. So we have to be able to distinguish between human beings and artificial entities, like including AI. So that's a transformation of the system we have now with very simple words, because that's how the Constitution works, right? It's not complicated words. Freedom of speech, due process, equal protection. These are words that have a lot of power if we do it right. And I think this is, again, I didn't invent it. This is better because Americans participated in coming up with this language. And I think it's really good. So that's how it works. It gets the First Amendment back. I am a First Amendment lawyer. I've defended journalists who've been tried to be silenced. I believe in free speech. This is better free speech, more free speech than the current system that we have now.
Feingold and McCain recognized the problem in the earlier 2000s. At that point, there was about $1.5 billion being spent on campaigns. Today, it's in excess of $20 billion. So imagine if some of that money that's being given went to treating cancer or help provide for health care or child care. I mean, there are any number of things if you want to donate money to that would benefit the public to a larger degree.
Excellent. Yeah, I love how you frame that because, and we talk about this a lot in our Rebuilding American Civics class, that civil liberties are great, but all of our civil liberties have reasonable restrictions. Mm-hmm. None of them are unlimited. Mm-hmm. And so what you're talking about with this reasonableness language, right, is mm-hmm. exactly in line with how we've comported ourselves with respect to this over 2 centuries.
Yeah, that's right. And we didn't make up that word either. The founders used that in the Fourth Amendment. Yep. No unreasonable search and seizure, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes people say, oh, no one will know what unreasonable is or reasonable. And we've been doing that for 200 years, right? We know it. The judges know it. We might have disagreements in the margins. It might not always be obvious. There are hard cases, and there will be after this amendment. But yeah, this is exactly how our Bill of Rights, which by the way were all amendments. The founders didn't do that. The Supreme Court didn't do that. We, the people, did the Bill of Rights. But that's exactly right, Sam. This is how we've always protected liberty and democracy in this country.
I'll remind you, if you've got some questions, please pass them to the side here so we can get those. So we seem to have a situation that often comes up that we have statutes, we have regulations, sometimes even constitutional amendments, and people tried then to figure out the workaround, right? As soon as McCain-Feingold came up, the next piece was, okay, how do we beat this system? How does this new amendment anticipate some of that and perhaps prevent that?
Yeah, so this is...
You go right ahead, you're the lawyer.
All right, and then you jump in too, Judy, please, because as I said, the lawyers have made a hash of things, so make sure you speak up. But no, this is America. We will always have lawyers. We will always have litigation. We will always have hard-fought politics. I'm from Boston. We elected Mayor Curley from his jail cell, so this, as I say in Boston and maybe here, politics ain't beanbag. There'll always be efforts to rig the system. So that goes with the territory, and the framers of the Constitution knew that. It's not designed for angels. It's designed for human beings trying to govern ourselves and make this unique system of freedom survive. And so we take that as a given. So what we need to make sure is that we're able to address the situations when they get out of hand. So people will go to jail sometimes because they violate laws. And it used to be, like Mayor Curley, it would happen in Boston. It didn't mean the whole country was going to go down. Chicago, Mayor Daley, or whatever. It didn't mean, but now the problem is we have systemic corruption. It's everywhere. It's built into the system. And we can't deal with that. And we can't fix that because it's in the system. So, we have assault laws and murder laws. It doesn't mean that doesn't happen, sadly. It means we enforce the laws, right? And when the laws don't work, we make better laws. And when laws don't make sense anymore, we repeal them and make better laws. That's what we need in campaign finance and in our political system, right? So what the Supreme Court has done has said, well, we have an idea here, let's try this, unlimited money, but the only way we can fix it is with an amendment. That's crazy, because we can't respond in time to fix it, but we will, because we're going to do the amendment. But if we get bad laws after the amendment, and people start figuring out a workaround, and you got to come up with a new law, you'll do that in Wisconsin. It might be different in Massachusetts, where I'm from. It might be different in Texas. It's the laboratories of democracy. Some things will work better than others, but we'll, in general, get good overall systemic responses, and we'll localize corruption instead of building it into our entire system. So it's a bit of whack-a-mole, but that's democracy, is that you always got to be adjusting and responding to new issues, new problems. So that's...
I just realized that right now our congressional people are spending anywhere from 30 to 70% of their time dialing for dollars because of the way this system is set up. So imagine if they could spend that time actually talking with their constituents and doing the things that we would like to see done for us. But this amendment also gets the monkey off their back, because once they have received money in from a mega donor, they are expected to do favors for that mega donor. And the mega donor will let them know that they're expected to do favors. And if they don't, they'll run somebody against them in the next primary. So there goes your voice. And now there's the opportunity to get your voice back.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the dialing for dollars. It's funny, when you asked the question and everyone raised their hands initially, if we had a room full of US members of the House of Representatives and asked what's your least favorite part of the job, dialing for dollars, all of them would put up their hand. They hate it as much as we hate the system, or they're really struggling with that. So here's a few questions, and I've combined some of these from the audience. So why go through all this trouble of this three-part amendment? Why not just follow the lead of other countries and create public campaign finance? And just a system that, like Germany, for example, that just does it publicly and not through private funding?
Yeah, Sorry, did you want to go?
You're the lawyer.
We already established that's not good. No, I mean everyone can answer this any way you want. If that's what Americans want, that's what we'll have, right? If you can get 2/3 of Congress and ratification in 3/4 of the states for an amendment that does public financing of all elections, that's what we'll do. We don't see that demand all over the country. There's some places like it, some don't. So, Germany apparently chose it, but, nobody in the world does what we do, right? I mean, Canada just had an election. You saw how quickly it happened, how relatively engaged in real debate they had, and then it's over, and it's, done. Other countries have various ways of making rules that allow elections to be relatively effective in terms of establishing what the voters want and letting them hear each other and have a good debate, and then it's over. What we have is not that. So I think we are a different kind of country, frankly, for lots of reasons, and many of them are very, very good, and I'm very, very proud of that. But one of them is we're a continent-wide nation of 330 million people, 50 different states. They're really different. I mean, it's, all of you have been around the country, like going from Boston to Texas is more exotic than going to France. So we like our federalism, I think. And so we want an amendment that actually serves that diversity of how we want to live. And I'm sure you love living here. I don't blame you. But you want to keep this like this. You don't want a uniform rule that people in Texas or California, because they have more people, are telling you have to have. So I think the beauty of this amendment is that it doesn't say, oh, Germany does it this way, let's do that, or France, because A, it wouldn't happen, but B, this is actually better because this allows that great American innovation, ingenuity to solve problems. So that's
Jeff,
how I think about it.
Would you see that also filter down then to the local municipal level? So when they're running nonpartisan campaigns, they could keep out money from the two major or three political parties if they chose to?
If they chose to, absolutely. I think if you decide, your school committee is not about politics, I'm just taking an example, or your judges, you could decide, we don't want this to be a national party battle with the donor class of each party fighting it out. We want this to be about our kids' education or our judicial system here. That's a nice feature of this amendment. You'd have to go and decide. You'd have to convince each other, so you had a majority for that, and then pass the law. But this amendment would allow that. Yeah.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, that extraterritorial funding, I think, has become a real concern, whether it's local, bigger outside money coming into local races and out-of-state money coming into
and
races.
I gotta say, we also have foreign governments spending money in our elections. That is not like a paranoia. Corporations 100% owned by foreign governments in the state of Maine spent $100 million in Maine's elections. Mainers passed a law, the legislature, and then 86% of the Maine people passed a law saying, that's illegal, you can't do that in our elections. They sued and said, Citizens United says we can, and they won in the federal courts. And so that's why we need the amendment. Like, if we try to solve the problem, even with foreign government money, the judges are saying, no, we're not allowed to do that. So that's the urgency of this amendment. It's not just the eccentric, irritating billionaires. It's also, foreign money coming in and trying to decide our state and local and federal elections.
One of the questions that came up a few times, how are you possibly expecting incumbents elected by this system to actually get on board to change the system?
Just give them a high profile as to whether or not they sign the Citizens Pledge and are willing to support the reform. So, calling them out.
Yeah, I think in the end, it's sort of like I said about the sort of whack-a-mole problem is we're not naive about politics. And so it would be nice if a good idea was good enough. In the end, politicians want to get reelected, right? That's it. So they also want to do other things. I think highly of the people who are like brave or crazy enough to go into this system and try to represent their people back home good for them. But in the end, even the best will say, hey, I need to get reelected to do anything good, so I got to get reelected. So in the end, they have to believe that voting for this amendment will help them get reelected, and voting against it will mean they lose elections. So that's an elaboration of what Judy just said about we got to sign our citizen pledges. That means we got to hold our electeds to the fire. We have a candidate pledge we use. We had 600 candidates pledged in 2024, and then we hold them to it. So, and the beauty of it is, you put your finger on it, Sam. They hate this system too. You know, can you imagine having to spend almost all your time begging rich people for money and then being terrified about whatever you do, you're going to get a primary spent against you? If they can see a way to have mutual disarmament, where it doesn't favor one side or the other, we can get their votes. That's what we proved in Utah. It's what we're proving in the states, and it's what we're proving in Congress. We will prove that in Congress with the 2/3 vote. And the we is us. It's not just American Promise. It's going to take all of us. But they want to get reelected. We need to make the amendment be the thing that will help them get reelected. And if they're against it, they won't get reelected.
And feel free to contact your your state legislator as we work the legislature, letting them know that you want this reform. Because when we talk with them and we're encouraging them to pass a resolution up to Congress, they need to know that this is what their constituents are holding them to, the support of this.
So there's a lot of other proposals out there right now to fix the system. I know Professor Heim last night was talking about fusion voting on the local news, Final Five voting, term limits. How does this amendment work with some of these other proposals? Are they complementary? Are they antagonistic?
Well, first of all, to get any of the other proposed amendments through, you have to get the money out of the system that's going to keep those other proposals from actually getting a chance. So the money issue is the number one issue. Once you've addressed that priority, then the other items actually stand a decent chance of getting passed. And you can come in.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I also would add, I think we can all benefit a lot from looking at history for two reasons. One, it kind of makes you a little more appreciative that it seems like we have hard times, but boy, look at history, right? I mean, this is not the Civil War. This is not some of the things we've been through in this country. But what's so interesting, the other thing about history is that we go about every 50 years into these periods of time where the wheels are coming off in the country, you know, where the cities are burning, the people are so divided, the corruption has taken over. And the weird thing is it's not weird, it's beautiful. The American people respond, and we usually do a lot of reform in those times, including constitutional amendments. So I mentioned the 18-year-old voting amendment. That's the 26th Amendment. It was 1971. That was the fourth constitutional amendment in 10 years. So this thing that seemed impossible, you know, suddenly they're doing 4 amendments in a decade, right? And you think of all the other reforms from your water out there is a lot cleaner because of the Clean Water Act, and your kids are not getting as much asthma because of the Clean Air Act. And those were Republicans and Democrats doing it together because the people demanded. And it was an era of great reform, even as cities literally were burning, political assassinations were happening regularly. The president and the vice president were either indicted or close to it and had to resign from office. So these were tough times. You go back 50 years before that, same period, 1910 to 1920, war, pandemic, you name it. And we did 4 amendments, including women getting the right to vote, electing senators, all these big things. But we also did civil service reform, conservation, we established the national parks, Teddy Roosevelt. So it's a really hopeful thing when you look at history that we will have, I suspect we'll have term limits. I mean, that is about the only thing that's almost as popular as this amendment is term limits. So we might have a fiscal responsibility amendment. We're going on, $35 trillion, maybe more in debt in the country, and there's no end in sight. There's a lot of Americans who support fiscal reform. So there's just and then fusion voting, gerrymandering, you name it. There's no shortage of ideas, and I think we can help all of us by sort of stepping into this moment, not just about what's bad, but about, hey, this is the opportunity where you get to do real change. Like, that's what history proves. So let's not miss our opportunity. Let's go for it. Let's get this amendment. Let's go anything else that fires you up. If you find a group as good as American Promise, go join them. And but because we don't have to do just one thing. You know, we can do lots of things.
Well, one final question. You obviously are working in Wisconsin to try and get the state legislature to embrace this. What can everybody in the room do about this? How can they participate?
Contact your legislator, sign the pledge, because when we meet with our legislators, we let them know how many of their constituents are behind this effort. And when you sign, we know what district you're from, so we can present that to the particular legislator that we're talking with. So yes, you can do a lot to help. And you know, our legislators typically don't hear often from the public, so when they do hear, and they hear from a number of people, it does get their attention.
Yeah, and so this is Alan LaPolice, as I said. He's a staff person with American Promise. His job is to serve you, okay? His job is to help Wisconsin become the 24th state. So talk to Alan, get signed up so he can be in touch with you when we do, say, a lobby day in Madison, or when there's a state fair and we need volunteers. What is it, the 2 states, you have a big fair? Interstate fair, is that it? Anyway, fairs and festivals and farmers market, we go where Americans are gathered to spread the word. So sign up, and you don't have to do anything. We're not going to barrage you with fundraising emails, but that way you get connected, and so you can choose what you want to do and match it to what your interests are. So, you know, Judy was a Rotary president, so she has become a volunteer spreading the words to Rotaries. And you may be in your local chamber, you may be in another group, you want to help us connect with them or talk with them. Endless ways to help, and nothing is too big or too small. So sign up is the way to get started, and Alan and Judy and all our volunteers will help make sure that we don't waste your time or effort. That everything you do ideally will be constructive and will help us get this over the finish line.
Okay, well, thank you, Judy Nagel and Jeff Clements.
Thank you so much for this really engaging conversation about this issue. And I hope you walk away today realizing how important this issue is, and a realization it's not going to fix itself. It's not. And so it's going to take actions. And this is actually a really good time for action in Wisconsin. It's for the reasons you suggested. And Alan LaPolice is outstanding in his work in this state. And the plan is to have this go to the legislature this spring. And right now we have the kind of bipartisan support in the legislature that we feel optimistic. But just like anything else, you've got to remind them. You got to remind them that this is an opportunity and we shouldn't pass this opportunity, and we want to act now.
The edge, you can do it.
I also want to thank all of you for coming. We're proud to be part of a partnership with Viterbo University's Reinhardt Institute on Ethics and Leadership, and our next program will be on Constitution Day in September, on September 17th, and the topic will be the concerns about the declining presence of local media. And if you want to look at some of the problems in our country, you realize they're layered. And there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. It takes many steps in many directions. So I hope you'll be there for that next program as well. Thank you all. This has been a great program. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.